Hi, everybody. I'm Jenna Blum. I'm one of the co-founders of A Mighty Blaze, and today we are welcoming for our Friday Frontliner my killer thriller friend, Edwin Hill, who was just making killer eyes at me in the green room, and vice versa. Welcome, Edwin. How are you?
Hello, thank you for having me today.
So welcome. So happy to have your deadly self back on the blaze. Today we're going to be talking about Edwin's newest book, Who to Believe, which is a thriller like you would not believe. So good. Yes, look at it. It's so exciting. Yay. And before we go ahead and get started, I'm going to do a little commercial for the blaze for always. So if you are a repeat offender to the Blaze, welcome back. Thank you for bringing your party this Friday afternoon. And if you're new to the Blaze, welcome for the first time. We are a team of 35 creative professional volunteers dedicated to linking authors and their readers. We started during COVID. We're now well beyond COVID. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube. We are ubiquitous. If you like what you see here, please give us a like or a follow on any of those platforms. And please consider signing up for our newsletter at www.amightyblaze.com. You'll never have literary FOMO ever again. No mo FOMO. Nobody likes that. So now, without further ado, we're going to be talking about our guest today, and I'm going to read his official bio. Edwin, are you ready for your bio?
Oh, yes.
Buckle up. It's you. Edwin Hill is a suspense writer and author of critically acclaimed domestic suspense novels. I have a question about that. The difference between that and thriller, but we'll get there. Who to Believe, The Secrets We Share, and the Hester Thursby Mysteries. A two-time Agatha Award finalist and a Sue Grafton Memorial Award finalist. Edwin's novels have received starred reviews from Library Journal, Booklist, and Publishers Weekly. They've also been Mysterious Press, First Mystery Club, and Publishers Marketplace, Buzz Book Selections. Formerly the VP and editorial director for Bedford St. Martin's Macmillan, so those of you who are writers, think of your questions now. He now teaches at Emerson College here in Boston and has written for the LA Review of Books, The Life Sentence, Publishers Weekly, and Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, which Stephen King, I believe, also wrote for. Edwin lives in Rosendale, Massachusetts with his partner Michael and their Labrador, Edith Ann. Where is Edith Ann today?
She's out for a walk with Michael.
Oh, man.
She never comes to my office, though, because it's too messy.
Somehow I don't think that that's actually true about the mess part. Hey, Mark Cecil. Hey, Thoughtful Bro. How are you?
Oh, no, the mess is like really true.
No, I believe that, actually. I believe about the mess, but I don't think a Labrador ever avoids anything because of a mess. Like, if anything, they'd be like, maybe there's some dead food in here from like 3 weeks.
Well, no. If I drop something, she'll find it. Yeah, but then she quickly retreats.
They're like truffle hounds. So I will say, for those of you who are Blazers, you know that this week is Edwin Week. We had Edwin on with Hank Philippi Ryan on Tuesday, and now we have the great privilege of having him again. And it also is Thoughtful Bro Week. We just had like a little drop in from our Thoughtful Bro, Mark Cecil. And if you have not seen Mark interviewing himself about his upcoming book in March, Bunyan and Henry, you should go and watch that video right after this one, because it is absolutely hilarious and charming and will make you laugh, right? It's so good.
It's terrific. It's well worth the time.
I totally agree.
And it'll make you excited for an awesome book yet to come.
Yes, we have so many Blazer books coming out right now. I'm excited about your book. Guys, full disclosure, Edwin and I are friends. He has been in my writing workshop, so I've gotten to watch his novels grow from, they're never just ideas when you come in. Like, they're always pretty developed, but I get to watch them being written hot off the press, which is like this incredible privilege. So tell us about this latest novel, Who to Believe. Like, if you had to describe it in an elevator pitch, we're trapped.
Oh, sure.
What would you tell me?
Well, so this is a small town thriller. It takes place in a little town on the south coast of Massachusetts. We can talk a little bit about whether that place is real or not later on. But it starts out when a local businesswoman, a local restaurateur named Laurel Thibodeau, is found murdered in her own home by asphyxiation. And as often happens in these cases, her husband is the prime suspect. He has gambling problems, and he just took out a big life insurance policy on his wife. He also has a rock solid alibi. But the murder, of course, because it's a small town, it is the topic of conversation in town. And the story really starts up when a group of friends, about a week after the murder, get together for a birthday party. And each of these friends has their own take on what happened to Laurel, what's going on in this town. And they also have their own little secrets and lies. And I don't think I'm giving anything away, Jenna, when I tell you not everyone makes it to the end of this birthday party alive. So what's unique about this story, or what the structure, that it's not unique because I borrowed the structure from other people, but what I did with the structure in this novel is I tell the story of the birthday party and the sort of the prelude to the birthday party and the aftermath of the birthday party through 6 different characters. We kind of go through each of them in turn. And so you will see conversations through different point of views, and you'll get different information about those conversations. You'll also learn about different secrets as the novel progresses, and we sort of build on information that you learn in the first part, in the second part, the third part, and the fourth part, as you learn about each of these different characters. And they all bring in their own secrets and lies. They're all interconnected in ways that you might not fully understand at the beginning of the novel.
Mm-hmm. This does one of the things that our friend Jenna Payon, who's our one of our women's fiction interviewers, our lit chick, says that she loves in books, which is to make the reader feel a little bit smarter than the characters, because we have the God's eye perspective. And indeed, one of the things that I admired about this book, and just am agog about as somebody who's trying to plot one storyline with, one point of view character, 7 point of view characters. I'm not going to give anything away by telling you guys like who these people are: the therapist, the patient, the cop, the boyfriend, the daughter, the minister, and should I tell the last one? That's my favorite.
Well, I always call the last one the mysterious guest, because there is a mysterious guest who has a keen sense of observation that sort of ties together a lot of the story threads. Hey, Carrie, how you doing? It's good to see you.
Yes, Carrie says, I love this book. I recommend this book to everybody. Thank you, Carrie. I can totally understand why. I am really on board with it as well. On board with the structure, on board with the secrets, and on board with the mysterious guest. And I'm glad that I didn't give away the mystery, the identity of the mysterious guest, because I thought you might want to keep it a secret. But it is a very...
a lot of reviewers have given it away and a lot of them have not. So if you want to know, you can find out. But I would highly recommend going into this book not knowing.
Yes,
because I think it's one of my favorite things about the book, and I think it's a good little surprise at the end.
Yeah, it's a great hat trick. It's such a good hat trick. But meanwhile, this whole cast sounds like an Agatha Christie novel in a way, right? It's like the therapist, the cop, the husband, the minister in the library with a candlestick. How in God's name do you come up with this kaleidoscopic structure and then keep everybody straight? Like, do you write it the way we read it, where one person passes the baton to the next person, or do you have this compendium of knowledge and, then delve it out to each person?
I sort of had the building blocks of the story in my mind from the start. And then the most challenging part. Okay, so I knew who the characters were. I think I might have had a couple of extra characters who got the heave ho as I was writing, but I knew who the core cast was. I knew who I was starting with. So I start with this guy named Farley Drake, who's a psychiatrist. He's a psychiatrist who has a nasty habit of getting too close to his clients. And his name is Farley Drake. And I kind of knew where his story began. I definitely knew where his story began, and I had a sense of where I wanted it to end. And then I also knew who did it. So I don't always know that when I go in to write a thriller or a mystery novel. So I knew who did it, and I knew why. And there's an object that's really important in the novel, and that I knew was important. So I don't want to say too much about that, but there's an object that has different, depending on which character is interacting with it, it has different meaning. Mm-hmm. So I knew that. And so a couple of the challenging things to do with this were, deciding where I was going to use scenes that had already been told through another point of view and how I was going to make them different. And so I would so for instance, a lot of the novel takes, not a lot, but we visit the party a few different times, the birthday party in this novel. And so there'd be scenes where people were sitting down to dinner or whatever. And so when I was writing those scenes from different points of view, I would literally I would copy and paste the scene from a different chapter and put it that was in a different point of view. And then I'd have to decide, I'd have to go into it with a scalpel and be like, what am I keeping here as far as dialogue goes? Because that's all you would keep, right? Because all of the interiority would be different. So what am I keeping here as far as dialogue goes? What am I changing as far as dialogue goes? Because people remember things differently. And then especially if I'm doing it a third time, like how can I really, really tighten it down to just a few key lines, because no one wants to read something 3 times. So those were the really challenging things. And then when I was editing and I would change something in one of those scenes, that was really hard too, because then I'd have to remember where it was in the other sections where we'd been to the party or whatever. And I'd have to go through and make sure that if I had changed something, I'd have to decide whether it needed to be changed in all of them. And if it did, I'd have to go make those changes. So that was kind of challenging.
A little, you think? It's like a master level workshop. And guys, another full disclosure is I am working on my first thriller right now, although our thoughtful bro, Mark Cecil, tells me it's not actually a thriller because it's not as intricately plotted as Edwin's. But I was literally working with exactly these kinds of questions this afternoon. If I have 2 point of view characters and they remember the same incident, do they remember the same dialogue? Do they not remember the same dialogue? And how do you keep from boring the reader when you're revisiting the same scene? So that's question 1. And question 2 is, how do you let the reader know that the dialogue is different or details different because of the character and it's not author error, like pilot error? Because I can just see all these Goodreads reviews now, people being like, that's not what it said on page 73, and on page 141 it's different, the character said something else. So I'm curious about how you handle that perception, and then also how you keep that scene fresh.
Sure. I mean, you have to the way I tried to do it was through interiority. So like the interiority adds a different slant on whatever the conversation is that's happening between the 2 or 3 or 4 characters. I would use sort of like anchor pieces of dialogue. There's one line in the novel that I can remember at this very moment. One character says, "Yo, look at that meat." He's grilling some brisket on the grill. He says, "Yo, look at that meat." And that is like a memorable piece of dialogue, right? So I could use that as an anchor piece of dialogue and then like have the scene go off that and be very different depending on how people were grouped, because at a party you sort of break up into different groups. So a couple of people could be over, you could say, "Yo, look at that meat. We know where we are." And then we go over here and we talk to this group of people. Or in the next scene we go over here and we talk to this group of people. I think as far as like the dialogue being different or being slightly different here and there, what I tried to do mostly was pare it back. So that it was just like representative of what was there before. But if it is different, I think I have to just trust my reader to understand that is how memory works. One of my big influences for this was a show called The Affair, which ran on Showtime like 10 years ago or so.
Love The Affair. Love.
I love The Affair. I love The Affair. And one of the things that The Affair does is that the scenes are not the same. Like people don't remember things the same. People aren't even like the characters. So in The Affair, for people who haven't seen it, it's about 2 people having an affair, Noah and Allison. And especially early in the show's run, every episode was divided in 2. And the first half would be from Noah's point of view, and the second half would be from Allison's point of view, or vice versa. And like when they were remembering the scene, they wouldn't even be wearing the same clothes. So like when Allison was remembering the scene, she might be wearing a skirt, but when Noah's remembered the scene, she might be wearing jeans. And so like memory does play tricks on you, right? So I think part of it, you just have to trust your reader to understand that happens.
I love The Affair as a model I'm so glad that you said that, because when I was promoting this interview, I was saying, guys, if you love The Affair, you love that sort of merry-go-round narration of a single incident, you're going to love this book. And it's one of the things I find fascinating is that memory varies from person to person. I've always wanted to write a book about a family going through one incident and then giving each person's perspective in that family. Like those of you who have any family members at all, or have ever had a family member, or have ever talked to another person in your life who has been through the same experience, you'll know that puzzlingly, you remember it differently. And for me, that was actually part of the great joy of Who to Believe, is that I got to go to this birthday party so many times, and each time the layer of information added to the sort of like cake of that scene. And so I was wondering if that was fun for you to do, to kind of come into it from all different angles and say, yo, look at that meat, which, yes, is a very memorable line. I remember that, that line.
It was fun, and it was fun just to challenge myself to see how this type of storytelling was going to be different than the. I mean, this is my 5th novel. I've written all of my prior novels have been multiple points of view, but more of a traditional storytelling method, where you know one chapter is from one character's point of view, the next chapter is from another character's point of view. So this was a different way of telling this story, and it's a type of story that I really like. I really love to get layers and layers, and I like it when your perception of an incident changes based on how a character sees that incident. So that was what my goal was with this, and readers will tell me whether I was successful or not. Oh, you just had something. You said something that made me think of something, but I'll think of it later. Okay.
I think it was something about like the joy of revisiting the scene over and over. I really enjoyed that, but I found it like a delicious and sort of delightfully fiendish thing to do in a novel, because you never know completely who to trust. Also, I have to say, all of these characters have so many secrets. There's so much sexy time. There's so much death. Like, I kind of quickly caught on that, like, everybody I follow, like, there's nobody here who's just like Mary Poppins. Like, there's nobody who is like completely innocent. And I have to ask, it made me feel very boring. So do you think that most people walk around with these kinds of secrets? Maybe not quite so much death, but I'm just like, oh my God, where is this town? And can I move there? Because
I think everyone has something that they probably don't want, like some hidden shame or whatever. And I think, or like some hidden whatever, some little piece of themselves that they probably want to keep private. Whether it doesn't have to be a shame, but it could be something that they just want to have to themselves. And what fiction is about elevating those things, right? So I took all of these people's hidden selves, their shadow selves, is what in fact I that was a term I really liked, and I have to give credit to the copy editor for I used some other phrase, and she said, how about shadow self instead? I think it just really it really evokes what you're trying to say here. And I was like, oh, I love that. And then I almost thought, like, I loved it so much that I was like, that would have been a great title for this book as well. Because we all have these shadow selves that we just keep to ourselves. We keep hidden. Think about Rose in Titanic. I mean, for Christ's sake, like, that's a great example of just a little hidden self that it wasn't bad or anything, but it was like her story that she wanted to keep to herself. And so fiction is about elevating those parts of your lives and just like making them really really exciting. Well, I remember what I wanted to say. I like that you brought up family, like coming in for talking about a family reunion, because everyone is the hero of their own story, right? But I think that is elevated to the millionth degree when it comes to siblings, right? And so I think it would be really fun, because when at least I know that when, like, with siblings, like, I'm always right, and with my siblings, I know they are always right. And I think it would be such an interesting story to tell maybe a large group of siblings coming together and just showing that idea of how each sibling sees an interaction, and what they bring to the story, what each of them brings to that story.
Yeah, it would be one incident, right? It would be one really dramatic incident, and then you would just back it up every time and show it from a different character's point of view. That can be your next book. You're welcome. You all heard it here first. A gift. Use as you wish. Mindy says, hi, Edwin. I have to drive. I can't comment, but I'll be listening. I'm looking forward to reading.
Hi, Mindy.
Book. Thank you, Mindy. We love that. And Sharon, thank you for your comment about Those Who Save Us as well. Thank you. We appreciate all of this. And Trisha who is also an author, also in our writing workshop, and also the Mighty Blazes podcast director, says that you write such wonderfully gray characters, no black and white, which I think is definitely true. Do you keep a sort of a character dossier when you start writing? Like, do you know who everybody is, and start with that sort of high level, like the cop, the minister, and then like attach a shadow self to them, or does the shadow self come first?
No, I don't do a lot of character work, I have to say. I do it through the writing process. I could probably be a lot more efficient if I did that. But I just kind of write my way into characters. I really try to see the good and bad side of every character. But it's one thing I do find really interesting. By the time I finish a novel, I love all the characters in the novel. And I think they're all wonderful people, even like the most horrible ones. And I do write about pretty awful people. And so I'm always surprised by it always shocks me when when like the Goodreads reviews start coming in and people say, oh, this person's so horrible, this person's so horrible. Because I always think to myself, I love these people, even though they're very flawed. They're very flawed. And I'm always trying to bring out the best side of very flawed people, which is what I enjoy doing. So, but I like it morally gray. I like hi, Julie, how you doing? I like that everyone kind of brings their whole self to the page in these novels, and that we see their bad sides.
Mm-hmm. So we had Julie pop in. Julie Meadow Gerstenblatt popped in. She is the author of Daughters of Nantucket. Daughters with a Z. Just kidding. Daughters of Nantucket. Spectacular historical fiction that we also were privileged to see grow into its published self in workshop. And she also was one of our Lit Chick producers and interviewers. And Julie, I hope you made it in time to hear Edwin actually cite Titanic with Rose having a shadow self. And Julie, we all know that a woman's heart is a deep ocean of secrets. And also all the men's hearts in this novel as well. And I think, Edwin, you were spared a little while ago because I forgot, but now I remembered again that there's a Billy Joel song called The Stranger that actually sort of pre-invented the shadow self, that we all have a face that we hide away forever and we take them out and show ourselves when everyone is gone. Everybody here is so happy I didn't sing that right now, but I mean, go listen to your Billy. I feel like that's a great theme song for this book. So I actually am totally with you. I feel like I love all my characters, and sometimes like the more debauched they are, the better.
Oh yeah.
So, because in normal life, I try to be a fairly good person. Like I don't push old ladies in front of cars. I don't kill people. I actually have a mug that I was looking for this interview and couldn't find that says, "I kill people. Relax, only in books," but I mean, I love writing the antagonists, and the worse things they do, the better. I just sit there like sort of cackling all the time. Like, do you think that we basically have like thriller brain or like novelist brain, that we like basically walk around seeing like all the terrible things people can do?
I mean, I think you kind of have to do that to be a writer, because you need to, I mean, like part of writing is creating conflict, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll tell you that when I write a first draft, it's usually it's like pretty boring because I haven't like heightened the conflict enough. Mm-hmm. And part of it is because in my real life, I don't like conflict at all. I'm conflict avoidant. And so I'm always taking my characters and making them be conflict avoidant too. And so then when I go in for my second draft, I have to figure out like, where can I up the ante here? I mean, there's a really important, like, I'll tell you, like, the end of the first part of this, the end of the Farley Drake part of the novel, like I couldn't decide whether he was going to do the thing that he does at the end of the of that section for a really long time, and then I was like, but that's what the whole novel's about, so he has to do that. So anyway, I don't want to give more away about that, but so anyway, yeah, I mean, I think to be a novelist, you have to create conflict.
You do, and you have to create bad things. I was even teaching a memoir class last month, and people were asking questions about like, well, can I actually write about this really bad thing? And I said, if you're only writing about pleasant things, all the books would be very short and boring. Mm-hmm. Like all the happy families are like the end, right? And then all the killers kill people in different ways. Do you ever feel like there's a sort of a jumping off point also? Like there's Farley, like he's a perfectly quote nice person, or at least he's a very sharp and funny person. You want to follow him. Also, he's really good looking. So I'm like, okay, I follow this guy around, and then you realize there's always like some little tick of a sentence in each of these chapters where I'm like, oh, I thought this person was X way, and now I think he or she is Y way. And then I'm even more intrigued because I think, okay, this person also has a secret. But do you, when you're writing a draft, once you realize you have to up the ante, so to speak, in terms of conflict, is that hard to do and then easy? Like you're like, oh, I don't want to make these people do this awful thing. And then once they do, you're like, yes, everybody's going to do horrible things.
No. I mean, I do know people have to do horrible things in the book. I'm trying to think of like with Farley, what I wanted to do with. I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but I mean, Farley is a therapist, and he's not an ethically minded therapist. And I wanted the reader to. I wanted that to be sort of a slow boil. So I did make him like. The novel starts out with a therapy session between him and another character called Alice. And I wanted him to come. In fact, one of my early readers was like, I like this guy in the notes was like, I like this guy. And then like a couple pages later was like, maybe I'm not sure if I like this guy. And then a couple pages was like, pages later, I was like, what's wrong with this guy? And that's sort of what I wanted with each of the sections. I mean, I don't think everyone is like totally without morals in this novel, but especially with him, I wanted there to be this slow boil of discomfort, so that by the time you get to the end of by the time you get to sort of the middle of that section's 8 chapters long. So by the time you get to the end of the 4th chapter, you'd be like, oh, okay, something is amiss here.
Mm-hmm. And you find out he's keeping secrets about one thing, and then you're not totally surprised when he's keeping secrets about worse things. But it is like this, the slow boil of discomfort is such a great phrase. Like emotionally, I think in all the sections, the reader is the frog in the pot. Like, even though we know that like there's nobody here who is like purely innocent, like, and we know that the heat is being turned up under us, like still when we're like, oh my God, it's really hot in this pot and it's too late to jump out. Like it's just it is still a surprise. How do you organize all of this? Do you use Scrivener? Do you have it all written on a wall? Like I'm pointing to my study wall as if you guys can see it. My study right now looks like an insane asylum because I have like notes all over my walls. Do you do that? Do you have like storyboarding? Like how do you diagram out something so complex?
I just do it in my brain. And I sort of work it out over a period of time. So I always know a novel is close to done when I can sort of see the whole thing laid out in front of me in my mind. And before that, I'm sort of like in a messy sea. So, I mean, I am not very good at anything, but there is one thing that I'm very good at, and that is those logic puzzles from the GRE and the LSAT. It's like Jenna and Edwin are having a dinner party and they have 8 guests coming, and 3 of them are vegetarians, 2 of them don't eat chocolate, 4 of them are alcoholics. How many people can have both bourguignon, so like for whatever reason, like I am an idiot savant about those things, and I think it has played well with writing this type of novel. Because I'm able to, I really like to figure out the puzzle and the logic of the thing. It can be complex and it can take a little while. And then I really like the process of, once I've figured out the puzzle and the logic of things, making sure that it's really clear to the reader sort of how all of the pieces fit together, so that in the end it winds up being a satisfying read. Like you were saying about Jenna Payon.
Payon, yep.
Payon. Like in a mystery novel, normally there's a detective, so like Poirot or Miss Marple or whatever. In this novel, and in a lot of my novels, the detective is the reader, and that's Agatha Christie kind of did that in her novel, And Then There Were None, which is the one where there are 10 people on an island and they get killed off one by one. At the end of that novel, the only person who knows what happened is the reader, because the reader has pieced together all of the clues and has figured out how this thing is working together. And that's what I really wanted with this novel. There's a little bit of a help at the end, but in the end, the only one who knows what happened to everyone in this novel is you, the reader. And I hope that proves to be a satisfying read.
You guys will find it a very satisfying read when you buy at least 5 copies each of Who to right now. It's funny that you mentioned like the logic GRE puzzles, because full disclosure, when I read mysteries and thrillers, I tend to read them the way like a cat watches TV. Like I just am kind of like my eyes follow, whatever. And I often lose track of the clues and the developments. But if I love the writing, I'll keep reading anyway. And I'm saying to the author in my mind, okay, if you say so, like if that happened, that's fine. If you say. And one of the joys of reading this book is that the writing is so good, as in all of your books. Like it is very pointed, it's very sharp. The reviews would say it's sharply observed, and I always find it very funny. So I would read anyway, but then I read this one and I actually can follow along. But what's shocking to me is, despite me not usually being able to do this, like as a reader, I was really good at the logic in the GRE. I actually scored higher on that than I did in language, and definitely math. I was like a 200, and so really, like I was very good at the logic puzzles. So there's maybe some hope for me as a thriller author. What is the difference between thriller and domestic suspense?
Domestic. Well, they're sort of they're all crime fiction. I mean, a thriller, like a pure thriller, is sort of a cat and mouse game. No, a pure thriller is where you are stopping someone from putting off a bomb, and you both know who is stopping the bomb and who is putting off the bomb. That's the thriller. So a thriller is really about good versus evil. You know who good is, you know who bad is, and in the end, one of them wins. Usually good wins. Domestic suspense is when you take a suspense story and you set it out in the suburbs, like I did with this, or in a small group of people, and most of the action happens among ordinary citizens. So there can be police involved, but it's not a police procedural, because that's not the heaviest element of the novel. This novel has police procedure because there's an actual cop involved with the story. But mostly the story is about the interpersonal relationships between the characters, and you're taking ordinary interpersonal relationships and sort of elevating them and making them a little nuttier.
Just yes, as I said, everybody has a secret, everybody has sexy time and death, and if that doesn't make you want to read this book, nothing will. You're basically dead already. So I was wondering this while I was reading, do you also have a sort of intricate and automatic knowledge of police procedure by this point? Because this is not your first crime-based novel. You have the Hester Thursby series. So are you like, oh yeah, Max, the policeman would be like, boom, this is what they do in this instance or that instance?
Well, a few things here. I have an advanced degree in Law and Order because I've seen every episode of Law and Order ever aired, including what is the other one called? SVU. And so when I'm writing a first draft, I base all of the police procedure is based on Law and Order, and what happens on Law and Order. And then when I go through to revise, I ask myself, what am I really guessing at here? And so I figure out what I'm guessing at. I usually isolate a few pages and I send them to some people who I consult with to see if I've gotten anything really, really wrong. Story always trumps fact. So if it's super wrong and I still need it to happen, sometimes I even leave it. I mean, I hate to tell you. The other thing, and I will tell you, I was interviewing Harlan Coben a couple months ago, and I asked him about his research process, and he said, I don't do any. I think I'm paraphrasing there, but he said, you know what? I just try and figure out how it works, and if it supports the story, I leave it in. So, so anyway, I usually try to minimize the amount of procedure in the novel. in general, just because I think it's actually kind of think it's boring personally. So I don't like, some people get really off on that and they really love the facts and all that kind of stuff. That's not what I want to write about. And so I try to minimize it, and what I have in there, I try to make it as accurate as possible.
Mm-hmm. So you and Harlan, I mean, first of all, just interviewing Harlan Coben as one does, you and your buddy Harlan, like, you don't worry that cops are going to come after you on Amazon and be like, look here, this is not how it's done. I got to beef you.
I mean, sure. I mean, they come after Law and Order all the time. So my source material is also flawed sometimes. So yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about it.
That's good. And that's not a dare, by the way. So if you are in law enforcement and you have a beef with Edwin, it does not mean that we just issued an invitation for you to come after him. If you leave him a review, make sure it's a good review. I actually find this very heartening, because I feel like the most interesting thing about any thriller, suspense, mystery, like psychological suspense, domestic suspense, is the psychology of the players.
That's
and
what
not
I think
necessarily the nitty gritty of the police investigation. So,
Yep.
And I always, sorry, go ahead.
There are different camps in the world of crime fiction. Some people really, and I think this is true of historical writing too. Like, some people really love the facts, and they want to read a lot of facts, and they want to see that you've done your research and that all those details are there, and that's awesome. That's just not what I write.
I kind of think of that as nonfiction. That's what Trisha said. I'm picturing Edwin watching Law and Order with a notebook and pencil. Dun, dun.
I mean, I've just absorbed it at this point, I have to say.
Yeah, like by osmosis, like through your pores, right?
Yep.
Trisha had also said earlier in the chat, I heart Hester. And what is it like to depart from your beloved series in order to write this slightly different book?
Oh, it was fun. I mean, I really love the Hester Thursby series. I just wrote a Hester Thursby short story that you can link to on my website. There are 3 books in the Hester Thursby series, and they are really fun to write. I really like writing series because you know the characters really well. So you don't have to do a lot of the non-character work that we were talking about earlier. You already know a lot of the characters. So I probably will return to the Hester Thursby series at some point. I think I really liked the short story that I just wrote. It took place over the holidays, which is always a fun time to write about. And it definitely is something that could be expanded upon. It featured Hester and her detective friend Angela White, and I like the dynamic between the two of them. So I might try and spin that into a novel at some point. But this, I also like I like to bring characters in. I like to have sort of a universe, so you can bring characters in that have been in other novels. Like, for instance, in this novel, Who to Believe, there's a character named Brock London who appeared in my last novel. He's a state detective, so it made sense. The last novel took place in Boston, but it made sense, since he's a state homicide detective, that he would travel down to another town in Massachusetts to investigate a new crime.
I love the traveling characters, and I love the characters that start as short stories and become novels, or vice versa. One of my favorite authors, Ursula Heggie, did this with her novel Stones from the River, which was an early Oprah pick, like incredibly popular, of course, after it was chosen for the Oprah Book Club. But before that, the main character in that novel, Trudy, who was a zwerg, a dwarf, was in a short story only. And Ursula said she really needed to build a whole new universe around this one persistent character. So I love it, and I know a lot of readers love it when characters travel from book to book. And speaking of traveling, you mentioned this town earlier, where, as Julie said, we're all there because it's sexy time and death. Like, we're all going to this town. Where is this town? I think this is Duxbury. That is my guess. There's a lot of ice cream, and Duxbury is so synonymous with sexy time and death.
Well, it is a little bit of Duxbury. If you've ever, so we're in Massachusetts, and so Duxbury is on the South Shore of Massachusetts, which is just north of Cape Cod. And so it's a little bit of Duxbury, definitely the beach in Duxbury, and the Powder Point Bridge, which goes across the Duxbury Bay to the beach. So I took that, and then I also took part of Plymouth. which is right next to Duxbury. I took its main street and added it to the town because Duxbury doesn't really have a downtown or it doesn't have a large downtown. And then I moved the whole thing from the South Shore to the South Coast, which is the opposite side of the state down by Rhode Island. And I plunked it in right next to Westport because I kind of wanted the bucolic. Westport is a very undiscovered, well, it was more undiscovered 10 years ago than it is now, but it is very bucolic. It's very beautiful, and I want it to be less populated than either Duxbury or Plymouth is. Westport is like Duxbury was when I was growing up. So I took all three of those and I combined them into one fictional town, which is called Monreef, which is named after a coastal town in northern England.
Oh, got it. I thought it sounded like slightly familiar. And also for those of you who are watching who are in Massachusetts, Westport is horrible. Don't ever go there. It's stinky.
Oh no, it's terrible. You don't want to go. Yeah. There's a reason why it was undiscovered. There's nothing worth discovering there.
Basically like a dump. I used to take Woodrow, my old black lab, swimming there, and when he got too old to swim in the ocean, we would go in the ponds down in Westport. It was like a very beautiful place. So like no wonder I feel like so at home in Monreef. Also, there's lots of ice cream in this book in case there wasn't enough sexy time and death. So we have a bunch of audience questions that are like really fun. In fact, probably more than we can even answer in a short time. So we'll do lightning round. Catherine asks, have you found that what you love about writing has changed as the years pass or stayed the same, and in what way? What a great question, Catherine.
Oh yeah, that is a great question. You know, it's so interesting because when you are working on your first novel, my first novel came out in 2018. I sold it in 2016. And when you're working on your first novel, you work on it forever. Nobody's waiting for it. It's like you can kind of spend whatever time you want on it. But there's also all this crazy anxiety about it, right? Because you don't have a contract, nobody's waiting for it, and you don't. The only thing that's keeping you going is sort of the faith in yourself, and so that makes your first book completely special and completely unique. After that, or at least for me, after that, I've had a contract for all of my other books, which has meant a deadline. I'm currently 4 months overdue on my current novel. Yay! And so there's always the pressure of getting something done, which is different. And there, having the pressure of a deadline is a gift and something that I appreciate. And what I like about my writing is that I'm always trying to push myself. I'm always trying to learn new things. The structure that we talked about a little earlier was very challenging, and it was like really fun to push myself and to challenge myself to actually create this thing that was different from what I had done before. So that's how I kind of keep myself engaged and keep myself enjoying the work.
Go back to the whole deadline is a gift thing.
Yes.
Can you explain that for the deadline to be a horrifying pressure?
Well, a deadline, I mean, honestly, like a deadline is something that I am privileged enough to have right now. So I just want to be grateful enough for that. Mm-hmm. And they can always go away. I mean, my publisher could say, I don't want anything from you anymore. And then I wouldn't have any deadlines anymore.
Oh my God, don't even say that. It's never going to happen. Not going to happen. No, it is true. I think a deadline, like my agent refuses to sell anything for me before it's written because she knows I freeze on a deadline. I've never defaulted on a deadline, but what I'll do is I'll wait until the clock is just about to run out, and then I'll sit down and like bang everything out in like a month. And it's enormously stressful. And so she's like, I am not going to do this. I'm not going to sell for you. You have to have it, at least a third of the book done. But it is a privilege to have a publisher waiting for the book. And I was remembering like when I had my first book, how I tell people it was like giving birth in a shack in the woods with like nobody around to hear you or help you, kind of like on The Handmaid's Tale, except the gestation was like 10 years. So very long gestation and then screaming in a shack in the woods. And then once you have a publisher who's waiting for your next book on a deadline, it's like you have a whole team of expert obstetricians who are like, how are those contractions going? How are they going? How are they going? Mm-hmm. How are they going? So the pressure is is different, but you seem to perform admirably under deadline. I must say, like you're
not this time.
What happened? Did they get mad?
No, I've had some things going on, so they were like, "That's fine."
That is a good thing. That is good. And
Yeah.
by the way, I need to tell you guys, like Edwin has like the Above and Beyond Award right now because he has COVID. So he's joining us like from the plague bed. Thank you for joining us from the plague bed. Okay, so Sharon wants to know, wow, 7 points of view. Sorry. Points of view. Do these characters keep you up at night fighting for your literary attention? Love that question, Sharon.
That's a great question. You know what was fun about this book is, unlike a novel where you write in multiple points of view where you alternate chapters, this was almost like writing 7 long short stories. And so I could really inhabit a character for the time that it took me to write the 50 or so pages that that character was telling the story. And so what would happen, the challenge was, so I'd be really in Farley's mindset as I was writing his, but then as later on, you know, when you're working on a novel, especially early on, everything is so micro. You're just working on a couple pages a day. I'd be working on like the 4th section, which is a guy named Richard. Say I was working on the 4th section, like I had worked on the Farley section so long ago that like at that point I couldn't really even remember what I had done in it. So that was the more challenging part. It's just sort of connecting them, especially at first when I was writing the first couple of drafts. Once I started looking at the novel as sort of a complete work, it's, you know, it gelled more. But it was I'm always like sort of in the mind of the character. They always keep me up. When they start keeping me up at night, that means that I'm getting closer to done.
That's really good. Do you ever have like a favorite or one who stands out more than the others in terms of tapping you on the shoulder and being like, hey, I'm here.
Yep. I really like it when you get to like chapter hooks at the end of chapters can really be things that keep you in the novel. And there were some good hooks with one of the characters' name is Chloe. She's a 13-year-old, and she had some really good hooks in her chapters that kept me going. They were emotionally solid. Let's put it that way.
When you're writing, can you tell us a little bit about process? Like, do you ever get in the zone? Like, I'm in the zone now where I resent having to eat or sleep. I'm just want to be a robot and stay awake until this whole story is out of my head because it's like such a lava flow right now, and I don't want to close the door on the characters by going to sleep at night.
Yeah,
I would stay up. Did you get in that space?
Yeah, I'll get in that space. It takes me a long time to get there, and I have to go through a number of drafts. But once again, that's like when the thing starts to really gel. That's when I think about it all the time. I'll be like sitting there and I'll think, oh, I have to make that connection, and I'll have to jot it down so that I don't forget to do it later on and stuff like that. But yeah, oh no, that definitely happens to me, and I'm anxious for it to happen to me with my current work in progress.
Do you get to it with every book?
I have so far, and I always feel like I'm not going to.
That is great for the writers out there to hear, because I feel like that is true. In some books, that's an easy burn. In some books, it's just like takes forever, right? But I do love that phase where I'm actively rude to my fellow human beings, where like we're having a conversation and somebody says apple. I'm like, oh my God, I have to go write something down. And I'm gone for like 4 hours. It's just so bad. Like, what does Michael think about all this? If I can ask that question, like,
Oh, he's fine. He's like supportive. I mean, he knows, I'm an artist. No, I mean, he's supportive and like, he definitely puts up with me stomping around when I'm having trouble sort of thinking something through, and saying that I'm never going to do this again. And then, he reminds me kindly that I've done it before.
Absolutely. And probably every book is the same, where like, I'm never going to get this right. Like that Dawn music on Sesame Street moment, the guy who banged his head on the piano. I'm never going to get this right. Never, never. And then you're like, oh, it's flowing now. Now I can't talk to you anymore. I don't know who out there would live with writers, artists. Like, you guys get the Above and Beyond Saint Awards. Edwin, I'm going to get you a black beret now. Just
artistic temperament. I already have one. I wear it when I'm not on camera.
whatever. Don't believe you. Gonna have to stalk you now. We have another question from Sharon. Will you be touring? And if so, how many events in Massachusetts? I'm from Massachusetts and would love to meet you in person. This sounds, because I'm working on a thriller, like a threat. She's gonna find you, but I mean that in the best way, Sharon. And let us know in the chat where you're from in Massachusetts.
Sharon, I'm going to be doing 2 events in Massachusetts. I'm doing Brookline Booksmith on, it just got rescheduled because I had COVID-19. It's going to be on February 22nd. And then I am doing Cohasset, Buttonwood Books in Cohasset in, that's going to be on February 6th.
That's so great.
Littleton.
And Sharon is from Littleton. Yep. We know. Now we're going to stalk you, Sharon. We know where you live.
Oh, and actually I'm doing another event on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday in, why am I not able to remember where it is?
COVID brain.
Yes, I know. It's going to be really good because I won't be able to remember anything. It is in, I'll think of it in just a sec.
Is it on your website and all your social media?
It is not on my social media. It should be, shouldn't it?
As long as
I'm going to think of it in just a sec as I casually look for it.
Okay, you look for it. Meanwhile, Sharon says she has COVID right now. Also, you guys, you got to stop licking each other's COVID books. Like nobody likes to stop doing that. But if you have COVID, it's a good time to stay home and read. Also,
it's in Sturbridge.
Okay, Sturbridge. Awesome. Okay, so 3 Massachusetts events: Sturbridge and Brookline Booksmith on the 22nd, Buttonwood Books and Toys on the 6th, and Cohasset, which is they're amazing stores. Both of them. I love Buttonwood. They're a really great small independent bookstore.
They're so good.
They're really good. They're so good. And they do have great toys, I will say. Like they have really good impulse items you will love. Okay, so we have time maybe for one last question. This is the best question we've ever had in any interview. What is Edith Ann's review of the new book? Edith Ann is Edwin's yellow.
She devoured it. I mean, she devoured it.
Literally?
Yep. It gets infinite tail wags.
No, infinite tail wags. I would honestly believe that she actually ate the book. Like my dog ate my homework. It's like my dog ate my manuscript. Right?
Oh, that's what I'm going to tell my editor soon.
All right, as you should. Oh, it's another 8 months since I delivered, but the dog ate it. So we're just waiting for it to come out. All right, you guys, on that beautiful note, buy yourselves 5 or 6 copies that have not been already eaten by a dog of Who to Believe. Go see Edwin at his Massachusetts event stops and check him out online. It's edwinhill.com, right? And also his social media. If you want to see Edith Ann, who also, by the way, has her own Instagram. But
Edith Ann Lab at Instagram.
Edith Ann Lab at Instagram. Meanwhile, I love this book. I'm going to go rewatch The Affair now that I'm done reading this. And all of you who are out there, thank you for joining us for our Friday Frontliner with Edwin Hill. Go get y'all some Who to Believe, you guys. Edwin,
thank you, friends.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Bye.
See you next time.
Thank you, Sharon. You too.